dear viewers and listeners. Welcome to the latest episode of Extra Extra. It's all about whiskey. I remain Jason Johnson Yellen. He, pointing to the correct side, remains Joshua Hatton. It is funny though, because even though I do this, to my right on my screen, my eyes are going to the left so that I can see you. So,
There's some cognitive dissonance there.
there you go. See, it's
You have
like
to.
rubbing your tummy and patting
I
your
was
head at
just
the
gonna
same
say that.
time.
Yeah, exactly. But you get it
Yeah,
after a while. You get it.
I taught myself to do that at a very early age, so I can teach
Good for you.
myself to get this right as we go. I promised, well, here, regular viewers and listeners don't need this explained to them, but if you're encountering us for the first time, we will endeavor to discuss a whiskey related news story. We will riff, we will chat, we'll have back and forth. We will taste a little whiskey along the way. And we will get out of here in a tight 35 minutes. Now, with that said, the last time we met on Extra Extra, you and I, Joshua, were discussing blended malts and the rise or the purported rise of this category within our world of whiskey. And I had implored our YouTube viewers, as well as our podcast listeners, but I'd implored our YouTube viewers to put some comments underneath our recording and that we would actually circle back to them. So, in the spirit of inviting our viewers into this discussion, we actually have 3 comments that we wanted to give some time to and maybe have some quick feedback on as well. So, Joshua, do you have one in mind that you want to kick off with?
Yeah, sure. So it's interesting. We post both the video and audio to YouTube. So some of the comments came in on the audio portion, and then some came in on the video. I'm going to read the first one from. Hopefully, I'm pronouncing his name correctly. Bill Monteith,
Sounds good.
1161. And Bill says, and again, this is back to this idea of malts, blended malts, blended whiskey. He says, I think the key theme here is chasing flavor, which I really like, right? And that's something we discussed. It's creating new flavors through blends of whiskey from various distilleries. Anyway, I'll continue. I truly love blended malts and have plowed through most of Douglas Lang's regional malt series. I'm in my late 50s and relatively late to the passion that is single malt. So I have still so much more to explore and am still trying to find my flavor niche. I also like the idea of blends having a story and also a little more transparency on what's in the bottle. I like that a lot. And then this comment I think is really good too. He says, let's not forget the Japanese who are blenders extraordinaire. We should appreciate the skill involved in blending, but I still prefer batch variation.
It is that world of batch variation that holds our interest, isn't it? It's that kind of, I love it when, well, I certainly admire when a blender can have a consistent profile and pull in different casks to represent that overall profile. But I also like having those little tweaks, like as much as, yes, it is a single malt and not a blended malt, but thinking about people who are into Ardbeg, especially Ardbeg 10, and like tasting L code against L code. This batch of Ardbeg 10 differs from that batch of Ardbeg 10.
Correct.
And that's all coming from a single distillery, right? Let alone bringing in, variation from another distillery to try and work within the palate.
Well, I mean, to that point, though, actually, I think what you said really reinforces something that I tried to tell people. And it's that single malts, whether it's the Glenfiddich 12 or the Ardbeg 10, they're still blends. They're just
100%.
blends of of malt whiskey from a single distillery. It's still a batched product of a multitude of casks, and there's a blender to create that final flavor profile. It's simply not called a blend because you're not bringing in whiskeys from multiple distilleries. It's whiskey from a single distillery, but in essence, it's still a blend.
100%. Yeah. It's interesting as well. We've talked previously about it's easy to think Glenfiddich 12 only lives in a bottle at your local liquor store, right? Right. The fact that it's distilled day in and day out, it goes into cask, it sits in warehouses. We're talking 12 years variance from what's
Mhm.
going into bottle now to what's going into cask now.
So
And
much has
yet,
changed. Yeah.
every time you go to that store, well, I'm buying Glenfiddich 12 in this particular instance, right?
Yeah.
There's no reason why that should taste like the last bottle of Glenfiddich 12 you purchased, aside from the expertise happening by a master blender associated with a distillery who then says, no, this is our flavor profile, this is our
Yep.
recipe. Remarkable
Yep.
stuff. And I just don't think we think about it enough.
No, really well put, and it's a challenge to keep that consistency going. They really are artists.
I have to say, when Bill mentions the Douglas Lang line of blended malts there,
Mm.
after our last episode went live, Jess and I were talking, and Jess had said, you and Joshua, you're forever bringing up Compass Box, and then you think everything flows from Compass Box. For us in the UK, Douglas Lang. Douglas Lang is on
Yeah.
everybody's lips. And as much as you and I certainly talk privately about Douglas Lang, and I feel like you actually mentioned it in the last episode when we were discussing this, but it was
Yeah.
interesting hearing that additional quality from Jess, which is that's the starting point. And I'll be honest, I can only speak for myself. It's never the starting point for me. My
Mhm.
starting point is always Compass Box. It just is, and
Yeah,
then what flows from that.
you and me both, but I've got Big Pete on my shelf. I've got some Black Bull
Right,
12 on my shelf.
right.
It's yeah.
I
Um,
think Big Pete is a huge mention there. Um, I think that's spot on. Um, oh, that's a good little taste. We will come back to that whiskey in a little bit. Can I
yeah, I
can I
haven't.
read a second comment?
Yeah, well, oh, Jason, that's so good. You're so good to do that. Go ahead. Did you
Yeah.
download it to a PDF, print it out on your dot matrix printer?
This one I used chalk and slate, and the slate is actually hanging behind my video camera here, so I'm just going to look straight through you while I read this.
I thought you used a pterodactyl and slate. Totally different. Okay, got it.
Okay, so this one comes from Ian Bruce, who we have mentioned
Oh,
on One Nation Under Whiskey previously. Good to hear from
mhm.
Ian Bruce. And so Ian says, great conversation. From my own perspective and in my own opinion, I see more blends, be them blended malt or scotch, being added by the likes of Loch Lomond and Thompson Brothers, as they see the new consumer to whiskey, parentheses, not only younger people, looking at you, Bill Monteith, that's a great comment from Ian,
Indeed.
this new consumer wanting to get into the market. But I think it's a multifaceted subject. And then he has a question. So, does current expenditure costs for a blender come into the reason? Does it involve the fact we have extra stock that they want to release? Is it attractive for those who want to make cocktails with a really decent whiskey? I also believe there may be something to do with the current prices and availability of casks in the industry, which
Mm.
may influence this current tidal change toward decently presented ABV and naturally colored blends. Colored with a U made me feel very comfortable. So there's a number of questions at play there,
Yeah.
Joshua. What's say you?
Well, it was the last part of Ian Bruce's comment that grabbed my attention because it's something I wanted to bring up in the episode. It's just we only had 35 minutes to
Mhm.
discuss the topic, and that was this idea of the increasing cost of casks on the broker side of things. and
Hmm.
how that could potentially affect blends moving forward. Now, part of the reason I didn't bring it up is I'm trying to rationalize in my head. Well, I'm trying to make the two ideas make sense, right? When you've got and I'll use this example simply because it was an example from the previous episode.
Hmm.
When you think of McLean's Nose, which is a blend that's about to hit the U.S. market, and it's just hit the U.K. and EU markets, at like 30, 35 pounds a bottle, somewhere around there. Adelphi is a small independent company that owns the Ardnamurchan Distillery. Now, granted, they have Ardnamurchan, so I imagine
Hmm.
they're putting some of their own distillate in there to bring the overall cost down. But anything else that they're purchasing, we see what the prices are from brokers, and the cost of casks of whiskey have gone up tremendously. So, I think at some point, if this trend continues where the cost of casks, trend upward and upward and upward, these prices may change somewhere down the road. It's yeah, it's tough to say. This is the reason why I didn't bring it up, because I don't know how to rationalize or like have these two thoughts make sense to one another, how those jibe.
Well, I don't know if it's necessarily going to speak to what you're presenting here, but clearly grabbing yourself a new make contract is imperative to
Well,
pulling
that's
that
true.
off.
Yeah, that's a
And
good
if you're a
point. Yep.
Delphi and you've had an established, albeit recent history, not as as recent as us, for example, but if you're established like they are, the hope would be you got a new make contract or two or three before those started going away as well. And so it really is this shifting landscape right across the
Hmm.
industry that's affecting current decisions, current models. And as much as, gosh, listening next Wednesday to One Nation Under Whiskey, where we talked to Holly Sidewand and Anthony Levinson. But when we interviewed Holly and Anthony this morning, Holly's saying, I'm somewhat worried by the amount of whiskey being produced. And then Anthony's talking about an inability to stay up to date with even just one line of products from a
Yeah.
single distillery,
Yeah.
right? There's a lot of liquid out there, an awful lot. And consumers are starting to slow down. Part of our conversation with Anthony and Holly. And if you take a slowdown in consumer buying with this uptick in producer production, you're going to get to a moment when casks come back down to earth again. Cask prices reset somewhat from their current highs. And then you're back
Is
to having an entire palette to play with, right? An entire palette to paint from.
is there a chance that we can fast forward to that period in time when like the world is back to normal and cask prices are like have anything to do with what the industry looks like, is meant to
Yeah.
look like, I
It,
should say?
but it's coming, and this is really is a conversation you and I maybe should be having privately. But come on, if you've taken the time to listen or watch this, I'm okay giving you a little bit of the inside scoop. But I'm now hearing from more producers who are talking about, let's revisit this conversation in 3 months,
Mm,
6 months.
mhm, mhm.
Whereas it was kind of, we were on a roller coaster and it wasn't clear where it was going, when it was ending.
Yeah.
The the tone of those conversations is starting to change a little bit. And they haven't changed in this moment, which is exactly when you and I would like them to change. Hell, we'd like them to have changed 3 years ago. But they are changing. There is a change in the tides, as they say. So
Yeah. A
fingers
sea
crossed. Fingers
change.
crossed.
Sea
Yeah,
change.
right. Right.
All right.
One more comment, and then we've got another couple of bits of news to get to.
Yeah, now that this one is a slightly longer one, but this comes from Dr. Matt Bishop, and we expect his
Always good.
comments and questions to be as long-winded as some of our episodes. So
He has friends in us.
uh, so Dr. Matt says, surely I can't be the only one to comment here. Sit back, Jason and Joshua, as here comes an opinion. Let me take
I'm holding
two
on.
recent let me take two recent blend releases as examples that highlight my thoughts on this matter. One, Campbelltown Loch from Springbank, and two, McLean's Nose from Ardnamurchan. Now, for some general context, my thoughts. A. Whiskey enthusiasts currently are struggling to get core releases from the current popular distilleries, as often these are snapped up for the secondary market or by ultra enthusiastic collectors that camp outside the distributor shops. And B, the younger generation that have only known the ready availability of single malts are easily led by bright, shiny new toys.
Hmm.
So my thought on this, I'm terrible with reading. So my thought is this. Are distilleries such as those listed above simply looking for new ways to supply their customer base? And because we are living in a period of financial instability, value for money whiskey is a good place to start. I was even contemplating getting a bottle of Campbelltown Loch as my favorite Springbank 15 is unobtainable currently. I feel you, Dr. Matt. For the Gen Z and millennials, they aren't carrying any cheap, nasty blends baggage like Jason. They just see whiskey from Springbank or Ardnamurchan at the price of around a skinny Odie latte mochas from the local artisan barista. So he closes it out with, shall we call this era Blends 2.0 and think of it as a rebirth of the category? Here endeth my opinion, Dr. Matt.
Interesting. Interesting.
Yeah. So I love this idea. Well, first off, the idea that Gen Zs are getting to the age where they can start drinking is freaking me out. But secondarily, this idea of blends 2.0, the idea of blends coming back, there being some sort
Hmm.
of a renaissance
Yeah.
of well-respected blends at good pricing. Man, that would be tremendous. That would because I think it would if Holly is correct in that she can't believe how much whiskey is being produced and we need to be drinking more, what a great way to bring other drinkers into the category through well-made, well-priced blends. But like if that happened now, I'd be a little nervous. Like I'd like to see the
Yeah.
glut happen a bit and then bring them in.
But I think a perfect example of that is I mentioned Woven in the last
Oh
episode.
yeah, yep.
And Woven definitely fits with what Dr. Matt is saying here about Blends 2.0. Interestingly, and I
Mm,
apologize, I forget the name of the chap, but the chap behind the blending at Woven
mhm,
had come out in some of their later iterations and said, if we were making Woven number one, number two, number three right now,
mhm.
A, we couldn't sell it for the price we previously sold it at. And to be quite honest, we couldn't make it for the price that casks are being sold for.
Yeah.
That's 1 year apart, 2
Yes.
years apart.
Wow.
Like
Yep. Yep.
there's no turnaround period there. And he is saying, yeah, we can't afford to make what we made a year ago, 2 years ago. So to the idea of being a producer who now looks at the scarcity of their own products on shelves I
Mm,
think there is a natural response there to say, okay, how do we put something on a shelf? And one of the ideas that you and I played around in the last episode that I don't think is particularly well received,
mhm,
and this could very well be my point, not our point. Correct me if I'm wrong. Is blended malt serves as an entry to single malt.
mhm,
And in listening to Dr. Matt Bishop there and listening to Bill Monteith previously and in talking to Jess about it as well,
mhm,
it seems like nobody thinks blended Scotch is an entry to blended malt, which is an entry to single malt. They
mhm.
are different drinkers. They're different people who go to different parts of the
Yeah.
shelves. And so the thought of Springbank wanting something on a shelf, yes, but something on a shelf for the Springbank 15 drinker who can't get Springbank 15, I don't think so. That doesn't
Yeah.
resonate.
Yeah. Interesting. Do you? So I like what you said, right? Where that blends aren't the entry to blended malts, aren't the entry to single
Mm.
malts.
Mm-hmm,
Do you think there's any correlation? Do you think that maybe single malt drinkers will do blended malts? Right back to Bill's comment about seeking flavors, right? What a great way to create other flavors is through blends. And if you like that malt presence, like have you already been on malts, single malts, and now you want to go to blended malts to explore that flavor?
Well, then that's what I wonder. And listening to you're right to pull out Bill in that one, and thinking about Dr. Matt here, if that is what Blends 2.0 is about, you're going to get something in a blended malt that you're not necessarily getting in a single malt. And to think of that blended malt taking you up the ladder to single malt, I think the response would be why?
Mm,
Right? You're getting something from that blended malt that isn't in single malt.
mm,
The
mm,
part that you and I left open in the last episode was our own interest in going looking at blended malts and saying, okay, what is on offer here? You know, we were excited by that Weems bottling, the way the notes were described was
oh
kind of like,
yeah.
yeah, that
Yeah.
that seems like something we might be into and might be worth looking for. That's a different journey than a single malt journey.
Sure.
Um, and so, yeah, we might need to think about these things differently. You know, is it any different than single malt whiskey people starting to like rum? Is it any different than bourbon folk starting to explore cognacs and armagnacs?
And Armagnacs,
Right?
yeah.
Right? Like one's
Yeah.
not a gateway to the other. It's just flavor. We're just exploring flavors, which makes
I
me
like
think of
that.
mezcal, which makes me think of what's in my glass. But before we get there, before we get there, the biggest whiskey news for our circle and our friends and the news that we were getting texts about and emails about is our very dear friend Matt Hofmann has announced that he is leaving Westland Distillery. And in talking about American single malt whiskey and the rise and the codification and the kind of making it cool by making it nerdy, like
Hmm.
Matt is in the insert Star Wars Millennium Falcon reference here, right? He's in that seat. He's in the Han
Oh yeah.
Solo seat,
Oh yeah. 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 He
right?
did that run in like less than 12 parsecs, I think.
he has
Um,
aged more than 12 parsecs in his time with
he
Westland, though.
actually has. Yeah. Oh, I think he spent about 12 parsecs with Westland before he finally left. Yeah, it's for those of you that aren't familiar, just thinking potentially of some of our overseas viewers and listeners, Westland was one of the earlier distilleries to help pioneer this American single malt category. And when they built the distillery, it was purpose built to focus solely on single malt, which was
Yeah.
quite unusual at the time. You
Yeah.
had plenty of other distilleries that may have produced a malt whiskey, but it was just a part and parcel of what they did. They
Yep.
may have focused on bourbon or rum or something else, but Westland was one of the first ones, and they said, we're going to take this brewer's approach to producing single malt whiskey. Let's focus not just on the final product, but what goes into that fermentation, that beer, that wash we're going to make. And in speaking with Matt when he told us the news, before it all got blew up everywhere, we were reminiscing about the fact that he was sort of starting his journey with I forget his friend's name, Emerson Lamb.
Emerson. Yep.
Emerson Lamb, around the same time that we were starting our journey with Single Cask Nation, and it's been a joy to watch his business grow as our business grew, and we shared a bit of an origin story, and so I'm going to share a little Westland with you and with the listener, Jason, or viewer, I should say.
Yeah. Yeah, just remarkable. We just, gosh, what, and 3 episodes ago on One Nation Under Whiskey, had a sit down with Matt in the Skagit Valley, discussing Solom, discussing how they've established a flagship product and these annual releases. We were at the WSU Bread Lab with him and having conversations there, and his excitement around grain. I haven't had to imagine a Westland without Matt Hofmann, but I also haven't had to imagine a Matt Hofmann without Westland. And
yeah, go ahead.
I'm not sure either one is going to look like.
So I'm glad you brought this up, because I've thought about this, and I love Matt. I love Matt. But in the end, I don't know how much it's going to matter, because Westland doesn't live on Matt's shoulders. Matt helped create the liquid. Meanwhile, there's other people who have been distilling alongside Matt, who've been mashing alongside Matt and fermenting alongside Matt and have been blending alongside Matt. And, similar to Balcones when Chip Tate left, there were so many people saying, oof, what's Balcones going to look like? What's it going to taste like? Meanwhile, it was the same thing. He wasn't a one-man show. It was a distillery that had other people making it just as good as he was. He just happened to be the face, just like Matt was the face of Westland. So from a flavor standpoint, I don't think it's going to matter at all. We're going to miss his big red beard and his flannel. Sure. But I think the liquid will remain excellent. I don't see any changes going on, right? It was a company thing. It wasn't a Matt Hofmann thing.
Well, speaking of company thing, right? Like Steve Hawley, a good dear friend, left Westland last year. Chris Riesbeck, good dear friend, left Westland last year. Matt Hofmann, good dear friend, leaves Westland this year. That's hard to miss that trend. And it makes me wonder, I've tried to be pretty good about, raising a glass to the big corporate giants taking over distilleries. Okay, let's see what you do before I say there's a terrible thing. The Balcones that you just mentioned, the Balcones example, right? Purchased by Diageo. Okay, Balcones fans, don't panic just yet. Let's see what Diageo does first. See where they go. Remy, okay, you've got Westland, you've got Bruichladdich. Let's see where you go. Seemed like, from an outsider's perspective, seemed like it was going along fine. People were doing what they wanted to do. And now you've got 3 exits in the space of a year. I don't know what that means to corporate culture. I don't know what that means for Remy having their hands off and letting operations happen. I just don't know. I'm an outsider, but
Yeah.
this news to an outsider doesn't look great.
Listen, Remy bought Bruichladdich. Jim McEwen left Bruichladdich. Adam Hannett continues to make great Bruichladdich whiskey. Sure, should people be cautious? Why not? But I don't know. Maybe I'm not thinking about it properly, but I'm not very concerned. You know, there's other people behind the brand, Shane, right? Who does a lot of the blending, and I just maybe I'm feeling more confident about it than I should. I I look at the Bruichladdich example, and I think they continue to do good things despite the team that left them shortly after the purchase of the distillery, and I just feel these guys will pull through as well. So there you go. I'm going to be the optimist, Jason.
Corporate America has broken you, Joshua. This is making me sad for you. Blink once if we need an intervention. I'm gonna. Oh, hold on. I'm in the wrong tab. I got myself lost over here. Speaking of WSU Bread Lab, speaking of WSU research, a study has come out from WSU. WSU was the lead on it. It's also Michigan State University. WSU is Washington State University. Michigan State University is on this. Oregon State University is on this as well. Listeners, viewers can find this at journal is called Foods, Foods. The title is Impact of Dilution on Whiskey Aroma, a sensory and volatile composition analysis.
Oh, wow.
Now, Joshua, they go into scientific breakdown. They had single malts, they had bourbons, they had rye, they had blends. They were doing sensory analysis using black Glencairns, right? So not seeing the color on things, you've just got your nose and your palate to go from. Okay. And what they found was a little bit of water does your whiskey good. But guess what, Joshua?
It dilutes it. Something less obvious. What does it do, Jason?
Too much water is a bad thing.
Wait a second. Who paid this grant to confirm what everybody knew?
They received no external funding for this study. It says it at the end of the paper. No external funding. So here's the thing. Yeah. A little bit of water is good until, what I like is they came up with a percentage, until 20%. At 20%, all of the whiskeys within a category, so all of the single malts, all of the bourbons, all started to smell like one another. That was the takeaway. The individual components that make you go away at 20% dilution.
So I have a problem with this. And the problem that I have with this is when you talk to the likes of the Balvenis, David Stewart, or
100%,
yep, right?
Becky at Catoctin Creek does the same thing.
Becky at Catoctin, right? They bring it down to 20% alcohol. Dickie P, Richard Patterson from the Dalmore brings it down to, he does 35%.
They were the first people I thought of when I heard this.
So these professors came to their conclusions. Scientists, all right. These scientists,
but they don't necessarily teach, right?
Okay. So they came to their conclusions. Meanwhile, the people who design whiskey go to the ABV that they say is not good to ensure they're creating a good whiskey. So how do these two jibe? How do they live in the same world together?
So it's we asked this question of Stephanie McLeod as well. It makes no sense to me to take any whiskey to 20%, right? 20%
None.
alcohol, right?
To enjoy it,
like
to enjoy it as a drink. The answer, I
even to
agree.
get
Yes.
but even to get anything from it, right?
Just be
80% water
flaccid. Yeah.
is 80% water, right? And so
Yeah. Yeah.
I've never understood how that practice actually works. Now, I do believe the practice is about nose rather than palate. So it is taking it to 20% alcohol for the nasal test, the olfactory test
Mm,
that happens here.
hmm.
I don't think it's necessarily going to cross the palate at that. So listen, if you're David Stewart and you've been doing this for 50, 50 plus years, and you're Dickie P and you've been doing this for 50 plus years, I'm on board with your process, whatever gets you where you're going. But the study actually talks about the enjoyment of whiskey. And so they
Yeah.
suggest in this
Okay.
paper
Yeah.
that's their research speaks to the success of the giant ice cube. So the giant ice cube ever so slightly dilutes your drink while you're imbibing, enjoying, but it's not diluting to the point where you're losing aroma and losing flavor.
But then you hear other people talking about the use of ice cubes numbing the
Mm-hmm.
the the scent and the flavor of it by up to
Yeah.
30%. And so granted dilution is going to do one thing, but the affecting that whiskey by temperature does another thing as well, right? Just same with wines, right? Certain wines are drunk at a certain temperature to increase the overall flavors you're getting from it. So again,
Yeah.
here's another sort of two things that don't seem to
Well,
make sense.
what they cover in the paper is they actually talk about compounds that are hydrophilic and compounds that are hydrophobic. And so then you get certain compounds that come out
Yeah,
based on one treatment and one set of compounds that you lose based on the same treatment. So if you were looking for smoke, heavy phenols, you wouldn't want to dilute, you wouldn't want to chill. If you
sure.
were looking for fruity esters, you would want to dilute, you would want to chill. And so one retreats and one comes to the fore because one's hydrophilic and one's hydrophobic. So I thought that
Yeah.
was a nice interplay within the study, really.
So are you suggesting that when we're drinking Isla whiskeys, we're hanging out with hydrophobes? Like I am 100% against hydrophobes.
Phenolic compounds are hydrophobic, yes. So they actually go back into solution. I don't know. Go read the paper. It is
I
well
I was
worth
I,
it.
I was making a really dumb joke. I was
No,
making
I
a
know. I
really dumb
always
joke.
just try to make sense of your dumb jokes. That's what I feel my role is. I try to give them some legitimacy. Listen, we do have to get out of here. We do have our eyes on the clock, and we are talking Type 35. But you and I discussed this Westland, right, to bring this back to our friend Matt Hofmann and the good state
Mhm.
of Washington. And this is a Jack Rose Dining Saloon exclusive. As you can see, it is Cask 2543, and it is Washington Pale Malt. Did we discuss this? Is it
Yeah,
matured? Yeah,
so
total. So it says total maturation 7 years. Cask type mezcal. It's not clear. My guess is it's a mezcal finish, depending on how we define that term.
yeah, I'm not sure how to figure that out. But yeah, earlier before you
Oh my
mentioned what we
gosh.
were drinking, you had said, speaking of alternate spirits, that makes me think of mezcal, and that makes me think of this.
Yes.
So
Yes.
so yeah, this
Yes.
was, for those who watch this and listen to this, who also listen to One Nation Under Whiskey, this was what we were drinking in the last episode, this
Mm.
Cask 2543, and it is just remarkable liquid. That day that we recorded that episode, Jason, I ended up that evening, I had 3 solid pours of it. It was just and it wasn't because I was trying to get from point A to point B. I couldn't
Yeah.
stop looking for flavor, and at points, it felt like the mezcal was over the top, and then at other points, it felt like that Washington pale malt was just, like, screaming with citrus and just, lovely pear drops and things like that. It was just I it just seemed to be changing faces every time I sipped on it, and I really, really loved that about this whiskey.
Yeah. For me, it has one of the best presentations of pepperiness that I've
Mm,
ever had. In so
yeah.
many scotches that I love, it's fresh crack pepper, right? Fresh ground pepper. This
Mhm.
is fresh jalapeno skin, right? It's just such a bright pepperiness to
Yeah.
it that complements the Washington Pale Malt and complements that mezcal spirit in its role in the cask here. And that
Yeah.
pepperiness is chef's kiss.
It's that sweet vegetal note that for those of you out there that enjoy Glengarry, and back when Glengarry was peated, there was always this sort of nice fresh jalapeno note that came through with the peat, and I find it here. I'm so glad you mentioned that.
Mm. Yeah, really, really cracking. Obviously, we own personal bottles. This is the sharing of personal bottles. Bill Thomas does not give us any cut of the proceeds from him. But so damn good. And Justin Hoffman, wherever he finds himself, whatever is next for him, we'll be watching closely. So join me in cheersing Matt Hoffman, Joshua.
Cheers to Matt
Cheers.
Hofmann.
Yeah, cheers to Matt Hoffman.
Job well
Oh.
done.
Mm. All
And of
right.
course, cheers to Bill Thomas for selecting this one. So yeah, really quickly. So
For
just as
damn
a
sure.
reminder,
Damn sure.
this episode was talking about the comments. We promised we would do that. We needed to bring up Matt Hofmann, and now scientists at WSU and many others have agreed that if
There
you
you
want to
go.
enjoy whiskey, do not dilute it past 20% alcohol. I would argue, if you want to enjoy whiskey, you know what I always tell people, Jason? Maybe you do the same. And I know we're getting close to our 35 minutes here. If you feel you need to add water because the water is burning your tongue or whatever, add drop by drop
The
until the heat goes away. And that's it. Once the heat is
perfect.
gone,
Perfect. You
yeah. Yeah.
you inadvertently said if the water is burning your tongue. So I just wanted to
Did I say that?
point
Oh,
that out
jeepers
to you. You
creepers.
did. But
If the
we
whiskey
all
is
followed
burning your
along.
tongue, drop
We
by
followed
drop till
along.
the heat goes away.
Yeah, that's
And
smart.
and
Yeah,
then I
that's
think
good.
it's
I do
good.
always
Yeah.
say add a single drop at a time. Dip your finger into some water, let the droplet fall off into your whiskey, and keep checking it, keep swirling it. Make it fit your palate. That's
Mhm.
that's why we're doing it, right? We're back to Bill Monteith talking about flavor. We're chasing flavors. That's it.
Chasing
So
flavors.
make
There you go.
it so that you enjoy it.
Make it so.
All right. Comment below, smash that subscribe button. If you want to drop us an email separately, questions at onenationunderwhiskey.com or info@singlecastnation.com. No E in whiskey in One Nation Under Whiskey.
Or ever. But yeah. All right.
And ring the
Jason.
bell.
And ring the bell.
This is a delight. I'm going to happily finish this and say cheers to you, cheers to the listeners, and as we try to get out of here, peace.
Peace.